Hey class, this week we're going to move on to module number 3. And our topic this week is the second superhero, which isn't really the second superhero, but we talked about that numbers thing last week with Superman. So Batman first appeared in Detective Comics number 27 in 1939. And as I said before, Detective Comics was DC, and that was one of their titles right there. It was written by Bill Finger, drawn by Bob Kane, and Bob Kane was definitely the dominant creative partner in this particular case. So even though that first appearance of him, which is the picture over here on the left, number 27 there, Batman was only in it for 6 pages, and the rest of the comic is okay, but those 6 pages are the ones that really get you. The Batman that we know and love and like to watch beat people up is pretty much fully formed. He's got the uniform, the gray tights, the underpants on the outside, which is always the mark of a good superhero. He has a hunger for violent vigilante justice. He even kills people in it as well. And also his true identity as the otherwise unsuspecting rich boy Bruce Wayne is also revealed at the end of that first issue, which is kind of an interesting reveal. Comes out of a door, walks in one door, comes back dressed as Batman, and it's like, aha, we never would have guessed. But his actual origin story doesn't get revealed until a few issues later, the death of his parents and things like that. So it takes a little bit to get to that. And that brings us to one of the often defining attributes of superheroes, and we saw that a little bit with Superman last week as well, and that's the whole mommy and daddy issues thing. It's very common in superheroes. The death of a parent or lack of parental love or something like that helps create who they are. So Batman is one of the most extreme cases because his drive to clean up Gotham and destroy any criminal that he comes into contact with is entirely fueled by the memory of his parents' murders and his guilt over that sort of thing. So he wants to be able to make up for his inability as a child to do something during his parents' deaths, and so now he's going out every night dressed as the Batman to actually do this. But other examples, Superman, he was an orphan. Iron Man, his parents were kind of inattentive, and they were also murdered. Especially in the Civil War, we get to see that done firsthand. Thor, his mother was murdered. Shazam was a foster child. Black Panther's father was murdered. That helped fuel him as well. That's how he became king. Star-Lord, absent father, dead mother. The list just goes on. All these characters have some kind of parental issue, and that's helps make them the superhero that they are. Okay? And the other thing with Batman, too, that goes along with this is that he kind of forms these proxy families, and pretty much anybody who gets involved with him, there's some sort of tragic element to that as well. So various Robins end up getting killed. He had a daughter named Helena. Damian, his son. He had a cousin, Kate, who was Batgirl, and she was murdered by the Joker at one point. They all get murdered in front of him, and it just fuels Batman's vigilante cause because the rest of his life is just so ridiculously tragic. So he could find no happiness, so he ends up taking that violence out onto the street. Now, one thing you might ask, is Batman actually a superhero? He doesn't appear to have any kind of superpowers, unlike Superman. Just a regular guy, right? Puts on his tights, underwear on the outside, and he fights crime. But he does have a few things that other people don't have that help make him a superhero. So one thing is billions of dollars. That is not something that should be underestimated. Its role in his being able to do what he does, because without that, he doesn't get to make the Batmobile or the Batcave or the Batjet or the Batmansion or the Batsuit. He's just some crazy vigilante guy wearing 27 coats at the same time. So he needs those billions of dollars in order to fuel his need for vengeance, and that's part of what makes him who he is. It's what allows him to protect Gotham City. Also, normal people get distracted and discouraged and change their minds, but Batman has done, exactly one thing for over 80 years now. So he's got crazy determination and dedication to one specific task. I mean, how many people do you know that are like that? I mean, it's scary, but for him, it ends up working. So that's kind of like a superpower as well. And then, of course, he doesn't age. He gets old, but he keeps on doing it. So in Frank Miller's Dark Knight series, he's 55. He comes out of retirement, and he's still kicking ass. So normal 55-year-olds can't do that, and you wouldn't want to see him do that anyway. Okay, so various incarnations of Batman have been replaced over the years. It's not always just one guy, getting increasingly older. Various Robins have taken over for him. Damian took over him for a while, so various Bat Babies and things like that. And he would be about 110 now, and he's still doing it. So that's a superpower. He doesn't age, okay? He's also practically unkillable. Bane broke his back. The Joker thought he killed him and dumped into a river in the Turning Sane comic arc, which is very famous because the Joker literally turned sane in that briefly. And he also got tortured and killed by the Joker in the Emperor Joker series as well. And then he blew himself up at the end of The Dark Knight Rises and Superman Red Son. And then, if any of you have read Grant Morrison's Final Crisis, you've got like 20 different Supermans, but the person who finally ends up stopping Darkseid and taking the killing blast from him ends up being Batman. And as you can see in the picture here, Batman is dead. They figure out a way to resurrect him again, but in this case, he's practically unkillable, and he still manages to fight alongside these other people who do have superpowers, and he always ends up being the one standing at the end, being either more heroic or more powerful. Also, there's the fact that Batman and Superman have had numerous fights over the years. It's not just Dawn of Justice, so they have a history of getting into it each other, and you wouldn't think that Batman would be able to go toe-to-toe with Superman, but he always does. And in fact, he almost always wins, which is the weird thing about it. You wouldn't think that, you'd think Superman would just vaporize him, but he doesn't. Somehow Batman comes out on top without any superpowers. So the fact that he does that suggests to me that he is superpowered. Maybe he's just lucky. I don't know. But the unkillability, the determination, the resources are too much for Superman to handle. And it could be that Superman just isn't as dedicated to his job or his superpowers. And also, Superman takes the high road. Batman has no problem, hitting below the belt. He'll kill if he has to. He'll do whatever he has to in order to take down his adversary, even if it happens to be Superman. And then, of course, they're usually able to, and this is what happens at Dawn of Justice, they're able to kind of share their mommy and daddy issues, and they come to a common cause. So Batman and Superman usually manage to figure that out. Moving on to a sidekick, because I like to talk about sidekicks as well. In comics and television, but not the films usually, unless you've seen the Joel Schumacher Batman films, Batman Forever and Batman and Robin. Usually don't have Robin, but in the comics you do. So the sidekicks are very important. So Robin adds primary colors to an otherwise monochromatic Gotham City color palette. So yeah, you look at Batman and he's black, gray, and blue, and then you've got Robin who's bright green, red, and yellow. Okay. He also provides plucky, youthful idealism to Batman's otherwise dour worldview, which is important. That's a very common role of sidekicks. He occasionally steps in and takes over for Batman when he has to. So when Batman is injured, trapped in another dimension, or temporarily dead, as we mentioned before. So there have been a fair number of Robins stepping in to be Batman for quite a while. And then he also occasionally dies. And it's important for a sidekick to die occasionally in order to help fuel the superhero, in this case Batman, on yet another rampage, based on vengeance. So he always has to avenge somebody's death, and it might as well be Robin's in some cases. So the film for this week, The Dark Knight from 2008, from Christopher Nolan's Batman run. So it was written by Jonathan Nolan, Christopher Nolan, and once again, David S. Goyer. I told you, his fingerprints are all over the DC Extended Universe. So this is the second entry. It's definitely it's a bigger, a much more serious film than Batman Begins. Batman Begins is enjoyable, but it's a pretty slight film. This is a very big, very dark, very serious film. And of course, this one's very noteworthy for Heath Ledger's portrayal of the Joker and the fact that he never lived to see the final product, which is very sad. And the Joker kind of overshadows a lot of really, really cool things going on in this film, and also gives it narrative unpredictability. So the film goes to surprising places and also resolves itself in a very unexpected way too. And the Joker's inclusion in that definitely seems to help with that. So the comic origin of the Dark Knight doesn't pull entirely from the Dark Knight comic series. There's a handful of those, and shows that David Goyer does his research whenever he goes into a project like this. So we've got Batman #1 from 1940 includes the first appearance of the Joker. So when Batman finally moved out of Detective Comics into his first standalone, the Joker showed up. So the Joker's been around for a long time. Batman #251 from 1973 revisits the Joker as more of a visceral menace. At some point he kind of became kind of a funny character. And the fact that his fate is tied to Batman's, the two that they both have to exist at the same time, and that's important. If you've seen the Lego Batman movie, that definitely gets to that too. Alan Moore's The Killing Joke from 1988 is a very kind of a watershed Batman story, and includes a version of the Joker's origin, which is kind of important. So a lot of people talk about The Killing Joke as in addition to Frank Miller's turn on the Batman comics. And then Frank Miller's Batman Year One introduced a lot of the characters that appear in the Nolan films. So all of those supporting characters really seem to come from the Frank Miller run. And then the Long Halloween, Harvey Dent narrative is echoed in this one. So the Long Halloween also casts a very long shadow on Batman stories. And also the interaction, cooperation between Batman, Gordon, and Dent, forming this triumvirate to try to protect Gotham from the criminals. And then, of course, the Joker comes into all of that. So, and also Christopher Nolan and Goyer have both been interviewed, and they talked about the importance of the Long Halloween in that. So there's an article here, the Batman comics that inspired the Dark Knight's hyperrealism. That's where I got a lot of that stuff. I will include my sources whenever possible. And your synopsis for this film, for those of you that haven't seen it, a new criminal's been making waves in the Gotham City underworld. You can guess who he is. Name starts with a J. Chief Gordon, I don't think he's chief yet, but Lieutenant Gordon has teamed up with ambitious District Attorney Harvey Dent and his secret friend Batman to keep the rampant crime under control. But the new piece in the crime puzzle threatens the stability of the city, and Batman is forced to make a series of terrible choices in order to protect the city he is sworn to protect. Don't expect a happy ending for this film. It's a very, very dark film, and it just keeps getting darker. Enjoy.